you had you had a fantastic idea. You got me onto Full Swing early. You were texting me about it the day it came out. I feel like you watched the whole series already. And you said
I
this might be a
have.
really good, yeah, this might be a really good feature for our podcast. And I think it's a corner we can park on reviewing Full Swing. I love Full Swing. Before we get into the reviews, as a golf fan, what does Full Swing do for you? What does it mean for you as a fan of not just the professional game, but of golf in general? I'm just curious what the appeal is to you.
Oh, I think it's must see TV with these behind the scenes looks, not necessarily the behind the scenes in the, like, oh, what does the clubhouse look like? The psyche of these players is fascinating to me. And then with this being the second season, some of the character arcs that we're seeing in contrast to what they were portrayed as in the first season is just, you can't get it anywhere else, right? And I think it's, as a golf fan, I view Full Swing very differently than I do, for example, F1 Drive to Survive, because I didn't know anything about F1 and now I'm a huge fan, but it was a very different experience to watch that. And it's the same guys doing it. It's the same concept. But man, I just love hearing these guys just completely humanize themselves in a lot of ways.
For sure. And I still love Drive to Survive. I don't sit down and watch a bunch of F1 races. I'm one of those guys who'll probably watch more Drive Survive than I will races, but I'll always look at leaderboards. I'll look at finishing positions, some of the qualifying positions. But I do think Full Swing got, rightfully so, a pretty bad rap last year. It felt like fan service and a little bit of the tour trying to market themselves a little bit, kind of sometimes putting a little lipstick on a pig last year. The episodes weren't terribly compelling other than the Brooks episode, which we already talked about was a fantastic look inside of his psyche. But, like the first episode last year was Justin and JT. It felt like very much a little bit of a downer last year compared to the F1 show, which kind of gave you the behind the scenes, the principals swearing at each other and the drama. This season, it seems like they've rectified that, which is what fans want. They want to see an honest look behind the scenes, warts and all, of what it might look like. I am curious about what type of golf fan or what type of fans the game is drawing. I'm a rabid fan. I think fans throw into three categories. Add one here if you want. I'm going to take 2 seconds to go on a side. I'm a rabid fan. Like I said, I got up this morning and I watched senior golf and I watched second tier PGA Tour golf. I stayed up and watched late LPGA golf. Part is because I love the podcast, but also I just love the game. I love watching people compete. I love watching the shots they hit. I'm absurdly into golf on a personal level and professionally. That said, that is a small percentage of golf fans. Most golf fans don't care about PGA Tour and Live to the depth that you or I might. They're casual fans, right? Those are people that if a tournament's coming somewhere near them, they'll go, to the Waste Management Phoenix Open, or they'll go to Quail Hollow and they'll have a great weekend and they'll have it on in the background in the house on a Sunday, but they're not living and dying and they're not drawing big, broad political conclusions based upon, the way these now two tours are treating each other. So that's most people are the casual fans. And then there's the fan that follow players, right? There's the ones that love Tiger and they're not going to watch unless Tiger's in it, or they love Phil, or they're not going to watch till Phil's or Rory. And that's fine too, that they just don't tune in unless someone that they know is playing. I feel like Full Swing is the show that can hit all of them. I think it's the show that you might get a cameo from Max Homa and the Max Homa fan's like, I love that guy. The casual fan can have it on because it just like Drive to Survive hit my interest as a casual fan. So does Full Swing, probably for casual fans. My wife watched with me and she was very much into it, asking questions. And certainly the diehard fans can really, really like it. What category fan are you, Mike? Where do you fall into that spectrum?
I'm a ring below you.
Okay.
That's where I find myself. I love golf. I love playing it more than I love watching it. I would struggle to sit down and my wife would struggle to let me do this, is to watch all 4 rounds of a tournament. But yeah, I agree. I'm not at your level, but I think I'm a step above, a guy that's just checking in for their gambling receipts.
And Full Swing hits all the notes for you then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's look at episode 1. So here's how I want to rate these episodes when we talk about them. I want you to think about the best golf balls on the market to the worst, and we're going to rate each episode by what sleeve of golf balls they are. So let's hold on to that note by just something gimmicky and dumb. Episode 1 was called "The Game Has Changed," and this is part of the problem with being a golf fan and watch Full Swing is there's nothing that's new news here, really. You know who won the Masters, you know what happened in these tournaments. The fun is seeing behind the scenes. But episode 1 was clearly kind of the Rory and Brooks episode. It starts out, there's kind of 4 scenes to it. It starts out with Rory kind of bringing him right away to the forefront, his relationship with Monahan, some of the challenges they're facing and keeping the tour intact. And kind of conversely, Brooks finding his way back kind of from the land of the lost, which they pointed out very astutely last year in Full Swing. And then they move very quickly kind of into this comparison or contradiction between the two tours, the Waste Management and all the weirdness there. And they kind of have this really subdued live event. It did feel a little bit like PGA pandering there. Before they get into the interesting stuff, they have kind of...
I have that in my notes too, that the editing, when it went from the Waste Management to crickets at the live, I was like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, it probably wasn't the rowdiest crowd at the event they were documenting, but that was a clear editorial decision to go from, the Waste Management to that crickets at the live tour.
Yeah, I did not like that. It felt a little bit disingenuous. And to their credit, they didn't hold on to that line through the through line. And these first 2 episodes were kind of, birds of a feather. They were 2 parts as a whole, so they're kind of a part A and part B. Really taken together, they're a full hour and 45-minute documentary, really, if you kind of put them together on a straight watch. From Augusta, we get a chance to look at Southern Hills. We get to see kind of Rory, whatever he was doing with the Dude Perfect guys and kind of what his media life looks like and how crazy his life is off the course. But then we got over to Oak Hill, and we got to see behind the scenes of what was probably the defining victory in professional golf last year, which is Koepka winning the PGA Championship, and kind of what that looked like from that point of view and how it framed both Liv's new kind of validation in both the golf circles and the media circles, and kind of Rory's, I don't say decline, but kind of the fall that he had last year from being the face of the tour to now someone who's not even on the PGA Tour policy board anymore. So,
and it was,
go for it.
Did you notice too that Brooks wasn't interviewed? He didn't sit down with the team. They had some sound bites.
Yeah.
I thought it was very funny that his wife sat down. Jenna Sims had a whole portion where she was there to talk, but I thought that was unique, and I think it goes back to last year. He was on record as saying he didn't like how he was portrayed.
Yeah, but
which to me is a for the listeners, Brooks Koepka is my favorite golfer, like hands down. And I thought that episode last year did wonders for his appeal in terms of dispelling this rumor that he doesn't care about golf. He'd rather be playing baseball, that he's just out there. And if it's not working out, big deal. I'm going home to my supermodel wife, my awesome dog, and now his son. And that episode made him more competitive, in my opinion, than any other golfer on tour. Like, I don't think any other golfer goes in and sits there and is that raw in his defeat. And as much came to it and said, I'm done. I can't compete with these guys anymore.
He said, I can't compete with Scheffler. How am I supposed to compete with that guy? You're 100% right. It was the best thing, I think, about any athlete. Best athlete profile I saw last year, and I watch a lot of them, was Koepka's feature on Full Swing. It was...
Now, what's crazy to me is they were able to catch lightning in a bottle. And this episode felt a lot like that Brooks episode, but for Rory. He's in the locker room saying, I got to do a reboot. I can't compete. I know I'm not able to win a major. And on the flip side now, it felt like it was almost David versus Goliath, and Goliath was Brooks Koepka.
That's right.
Not only on the scoreboard, and Brooks is a big guy, but the video clips they used of Brooks, it was like, who is ever going to beat this guy? Like, it was the aura of Brooks Koepka had never been on more display. And I think I had forgotten how close he was to winning multiple majors last year.
He really should have won the Masters. I mean, there's a really compelling argument that if he hadn't gotten frustrated with the pace of play and gotten outside of himself a little bit, he would have won that tournament probably pretty handily.
But man, like, and I'll listen to your opinion too. I'm interested, but it just felt like the whole episode was about Rory, but it also felt like this David versus Goliath, where Koepka was positioned as the big bad wolf. Like, here comes Koepka, and it wasn't as much live about Koepka. It was this guy just is out there dominating, which I loved. But man, what a 180 from where we were a year ago, where the world thought Koepka was done.
And I want to give a lot of credit to producers and the tour and both tours, because Liv has clearly let cameras behind the scenes there as well. But for the producers airing some of those sound bites where Koepka is kind of speaking right into the camera at Augusta saying, I guess we can still play, kind of there really are, he's running a direct contradiction to the through narrative that I had last year, that I think these guys could compete. And clearly I was wrong. After Southern Hills last year, I said, yeah, I screwed this up. They can certainly compete. There's not an issue there.
And I think Koepka's I think Koepka's an outlier on Liv. I don't think Koepka went to Liv because he thought his knee was done. And he saw, I think it was like 180 millions, the rumored amount, maybe 200. And he said, listen, if I can never compete at a high level again, why would I not take this money? And
That's
quickly
right.
He got healthy, and there were rumors about him coming back, about a buyout. So I think Brooks is the type that, like, he does the song and dance for Smash GC. He has equity in it, but that guy just wants to win. And listen, he can take it or leave it.
He said it in this episode. There's only 4 tournaments he cares about. Someone asked him, do you care about the Live tournaments? He goes, well, there's 4 tournaments I care about,
Yeah.
and that's where my, even his wife, who, interesting, they chose these wives to be narrators. You have Paulina in the next episode and Allison Stoke Fowler, all 3 of those women narrating a little bit. And Jenna's like, well, the majors are the only ones that matter. I'm like, Jenna, what do you even know? What are you talking about? Go put on a sheer dress and parade yourself in public again.
Brooks came home from a night out with the boys watching hockey down in South Florida, and she was like, hey, are you going to do the full swing again? Because I got asked to do it. I'd really like to do it. I think it's good for my brand. And he was like, yeah, I don't care. I'm not doing it.
And she's like, I'll be on camera. I'll talk.
Exactly.
She's narrating, and she's terrible at it. I can't. And I think Full Swing's doing it tongue in cheek because they get Paulina in the same boat. My wife pointed this out too. Like, the only one that came across as being kind of genuine was Fowler's wife in episode 2. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. You're spot on about Rory. This was, you said it in a text to me, and my wife said it while we watched today. You kind of feel bad for Rory. You kind of feel like, in one hand, he has been built up, and he has clearly built himself up. Very early on, they asked him, are you the best player in the world? Yeah. Why? Because I am. He's built himself up to a place that he almost cannot possibly validate right now with how he's playing golf. He wins a couple big events a year. If he contends at 1 or 2 majors, it's great, but he hasn't won a major tournament in 10 years. He's clearly focused on the contemporaries. He mentioned several times not having someone from his generation pass him in the number of majors. Like, this is a very, and you hit the nail on the head. The look behind the scenes in the locker room, which is what I love. I love the little things, the intercuts where they're in the locker room, him going, I can't change everything. It's broken. It was very Brooksish. But what's even more sympathetic is Monahan and the PGA Tour. He was their useful idiot. They kind of used him to move the tour needle and to build support amongst the players. And Rory became a bit of a bad guy amongst his peers. They're shouting matches at certain meetings. Grayson Murray, standing up to him, and Roy screaming back at him. Rory likes to be liked. Those type of moments aren't really him. And then for Monahan to pull the rug out from underneath him and reverse course without telling him, you walk away feeling like this is, almost a Greek tragedy for him. And how can you play good golf when this is going on in the background? Whereas Liv seems to have brought Brooks peace.
You nailed it. I was indifferent on Rory heading into this. I've always been indifferent on Rory. I think he's fun to watch. He's never done anything to tick me off or to kind of put him in my Tiger list of people I don't like. I walk away from this series a big Rory fan. And it's not because of necessarily, I like Rory the person. I think he got one of the rawest deals in sports. That he, almost like a Batman, like he was not the hero that we deserved, but the hero we needed. And for them I think it cost him a full season of golf, if not more. 100%. There's no way. And someone said it was a narrative that was like, you can't be a politician and a golfer.
Yeah.
And he was doing.
They have Dethier and Rappaport doing the journalist side, and Amanda Balionis, who's great. But they said those same things you're just saying now. How can you do it?
You can't, right? And then I think there was a line too that was Rappaport that said like, hey Rory, just remember that when the big decisions are going to be made, you're not going to be in that room. Like dance monkey dance.
That's exactly it. And Rory at the very start of this episode says, they asked about his relationship with Jay Monahan. They show him in that clip, and this now was very intentional. Once you watch the whole episode, it's very intentional. You have Rory at kind of this little, mixer where he's clearly being kind of paraded around by Monahan. Look who my buddy is. They're launching some new golf center, and Rory's there shaking hands and kissing babies, and Monahan's got pictures with him. And Rory goes on camera in his confessional is like, well, I would say I'm closer to Jay than any of the other players on tour. Remember him saying that? It's like, I'm close to this guy. And at the time, you're like, man, what an arrogant thing. What a dick. And what you realize is the show being so well produced this year is setting you up for the rug being pulled out from underneath him, and him kind of look in the mirror going, I think I've been betrayed or been used, and how unimportant even Rory is to the PGA Tour, which comes out looking like the ultimate bad guy here. If anybody can make the Live Tour look like they are kind of more upstanding, it's what happened with Monahan and the PGA Tour in this episode and in real life. So you do walk away feeling pretty bad for Rory. And some other guys don't look great in this episode. Your JT looks kind of, spiteful towards Live guys. Not a great JT episode, right? Like his comment about Mito Pereira at the Champions Dinner. Like, I want to thank Mito for this. Like, dude, that is unnecessary. And a shot at a Live guy, right? And Mito's on the Live Tour. And JT kind of clearly stating, like, I don't talk to those guys. I probably wouldn't talk to him anyway. But really clearly drawing a personality line in the sand that kind of makes him look a little bit trite,
So I've watched the entire season, and I'll say this, that I don't think anyone comes out of this looking worse than JT.
And I like JT, but he took some Q rating hit to me after this episode for sure.
And it gets worse. I'll leave it at that.
I cannot wait to what gets to seeing more of that.
But maybe to wrap up the first episode is that embrace between Rory and Brooks after Brooks won the PGA, I thought was, I don't know, it's that was special to me. And that's such a corny way to say it. Like, I hate that I'm saying that, that way, but like unexpected and seemed genuine on both sides. Like, Koepka doesn't give people the time of day, right? He's a kind of half-asses, daps up people. That was like a 4-second embrace that you could tell meant a lot to both players.
And what was really interesting about that is Brooks hears his name called all the time and he ignores it. He heard Rory's voice. Like, he heard him across the parking lot, and the camera picked it up very clearly. Rory calls out to him a couple times. Brooks, who gets called out a million times, like, stops. Like, that's Rory's voice. And I think the producers are good at this as well. I may be reading too much into it, but they go a long way to showing Brooks blowing off other players. Like Matt Fitzpatrick twice tries to dap up Brooks, and he just blows, like, poor Matt Fitzpatrick.
What's up, buddy?
Yeah,
hey,
what's
buddy.
up, dude? Let's move along.
Hey, kid.
But he stops mid parking lot for Rory, and they have that embrace, and you get the feeling if they're not buddies, they have a respect. And I think Rory has it with several players. You see it with Fowler as well in the next episode. That gives you that Rory is a genuinely good guy. And I think he does want these guys back together. He thinks the tour is healthy. I think he does care about the product and about the fan. I think the takeaway here is some of these guys do care about the fans. I think Rory genuinely cares about the fans. And he wants
you know what it felt like? It felt like the Rocky when he's in Russia and he's like, if I can change and you can change, we can all change. And I butchered the quote, but like that embrace with Brooks was like and I'm probably reading too much into it, but if you're Monahan watching that, you're probably like, oh, like I really was hoping my guy there was I really want this rivalry to grow. I want the divide to get deeper. And watching Rory, who you paraded out as your champion against Liv, more or less extend the olive branch, I thought was really cool.
It was cool. And it was cool they got it on film. It's cool that they were encouraged to put that out there. I don't think anybody's telling Netflix what not to show. It's cool they had access to the Champions Dinner at the PGA Championship. I think there's some really cool things in this show. I also think, like, they're, Rory saying they're villains, and we're the good guys. But I think the producers try to bear that out. Like Claude Harmon, Brooks's coach, who I know you may or may not like, but that dude just comes across like, I'm collecting receipts. Like, get out of here, Claude Harmon. Like, we don't need you. But I think they're very intentional with kind of putting a black hat on some people here. My wife had
I was going to kick out like a guy like Claude Harmon who, like, you're not the golfer, dude. Like, I respect what you do, but don't act like you're in the fight with him.
And there wasn't a lot of levity in this episode, other than who was it, Spieth and Fowler firing golf balls at Hadwin in the opening scene in the crapper. That's like really the only, like, there was not a lot of levity. It felt very serious, and which is kind of a good thing, but it gave the episode a lot of gravitas. I do want to point out a few things my wife said, then we'll move on to the next episode. Her first thing she said, she didn't say much to the first 20 minutes until Phil Mickelson showed up. And she said, my God, what happened to him? Why is he so skinny? Is he sick? And I had to explain to her, he's just on a coffee diet. That's it. He just drinks coffee. That's what happens.
That's it.
That was her very first take.
His protein-infused coffee.
And, my wife knows a lot about the game, but she didn't quite understand from the show which players were live players and which players weren't. She wanted to know more from the show, like who's a live guy? Is Collin Morikawa live? Is he not? Which was a kind of a good point if you're watching this with your spouse or someone who's not, a quote unquote golf fan. She loved Collin Morikawa though. She thinks he's cute. So that's another win for the tours, Collin Morikawa and my wife.
Maybe he can win something.
She also pointed out that she thinks that Donald Trump and Phil Mickelson share a hairstylist. That's not a compliment to Phil. So Phil took
this is not a political podcast, Josh.
You're right.
It's not
We're
a political podcast.
The episode ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. The news of the quote unquote merger, which is not quite a merger. I think it's more of, I think they call it a framework agreement. And they leave us hanging there. So episode 1, what's your grade? Give me a quick score for episode 1 on the golf ball sleeve. What kind of sleeve of golf balls was it?
See, all right. I'm going to have a different one than you probably, because I've seen them all, so I can stack them up.
All right.
These are AVXs.
Okay, that's good. I think that's right in the wheelhouse. I was going to say like a good kind of high-end Strixon, but I think AVX is a good one. I think an AVX is a good one. Good golf ball, not the best. Good, good for the marketplace. Good. Episode 2, I think, was a stronger episode. I don't know if you felt that way.
I didn't. I liked episode 1 better.
Okay, I felt episode 2 was a little bit stronger just because the Ricky story at the end. I have a soft spot for that dude, and he's frustrating. Episode 2, Game Has Changed Part 2. It was really interesting as far as Rory's complete turn against the tour here, from being Jay's best buddy to now like they can do whatever the hell they want. I found that to be really compelling storyline. Again, broken into several scenes. The first is, and I don't even want to talk much about this, is kind of your Jay Monahan behind the scenes at the PGA Tour. They kind of give that.
How slimy was that? How slimy was that?
So slimy, dude.
Like, he's sitting in there with PR lawyers, and they're planning out his every word. And Monahan's like, "Well, I'm just fighting, my desire to tell the truth and to answer questions." Like, shut up, dude.
I mean,
no, you're not.
Dude did Rory so dirty. I can't believe he's allowing himself to be filmed. He looks terrible. He looks terrible in this. And he seems like in this whole thing, in the whole merger, and in not just the show, but in real life too, he's a man drowning who's grabbing onto any piece of floating debris coming by. And if someone else is clinging onto that floating piece of debris, he's throwing him off of it to drown so he can save himself. That's how I see him. Like, to go from where he was, this moral high ground, which he calls out in episode 1, this moral, this ambiguity morally, and now all of a sudden he's like, well, we're going to have a merger. And he's sitting there with Al Ramyan, on these news channels. It's outrageous. And so the first
one
part
thing
of this,
that slight spoiler alert, but they never address the fact that he took that sabbatical for health reasons.
Crazy. You're exactly right. Like, that dude disappeared. You thought he might lose his job. That was wild. You're exactly right. Right when they needed him most, that guy was like, I got a health sabbatical. He pulled
an Urban Meyer.
It was awful. And they show him sitting at that table, like you mentioned. It looked like a mediation for like a divorce. It just was a ridiculous.
It was just so insincere. It gave you like a good insight into what corporate, with these corporate people, they don't care about the consumer. They don't care about the player.
Yeah.
Right. Like, no. Rory doesn't have a 8 PR people sitting there telling him what to do and how to spin it.
No.
I'm surprised the tour let that scene stay in.
Well, again, it's got the tour just can't have. They must not have final cut, right? They just don't have control. Once it's on film, the tour can't tell them what to put in because you're right that the producers know exactly how bad Monahan looks. They have to. These are not dumb people. They've done Drive to Survive. They know exactly how they're building their characters. That's why you love Drive to Survive because especially these principals. Gunter, being Gunter and all these different guys. They know what they're doing, and Monahan looks like the clown that he is completely. So the first half of this episode is not. It's compelling, but it's a little bit cringy, especially the Dustin Johnson scenes in part 2. I am not a DJ fan. You might be. I find him tremendously boring, except when you roll his wife onto screen and she's trying out for a 1940s movie role with just every dramatic gesture, every crazy thing that she says. It's great having Paulina on the show because she's so cringily entertaining. It's like watching Vanderpump Rules when she's on. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Paulina in a while, and I was taken back by some of her new styles.
She's making these. Her and Jenna totally are making style choices on this. They're clearly pushing brands. Both are below.
I thought Paulina was less self-motivated than Jenna.
Agreed.
That's a wild thing that my husband's not even part of this show, but I'm still going to be part of this. I think I'm so important to the golf world that they want to hear my opinion when my husband has said, I'm not, I have nothing to do with this.
Yeah. Well, the DJ stuff, the only thing compelling about the DJ stuff was watching his idiot brother, Austin, like the whitest dude in America. He's the typical hanger-oner brother who's caddies for him. When Dustin grows a beard, he grows a beard. He's drunk half the time on these scenes. If I make a hole in one here, Netflix has to, give me free service for it's just an idiot stuff. But
the only compelling thing I took from DJ was he seemed to genuinely love LACC.
He did like it.
There were 3 different occasions where he's like, I love this, or it's beautiful and I love it. And Paulina asked him, he's like, yeah, this thing fits my game great.
All but one hole, apparently. I think 17 of the holes did, but the second hole apparently ate his lunch. And that's the third segment, is the LACC segment, kind of Ricky Fowler's journey. And once they introduce Ricky, you kind of feel like there's some heart brought back into it. And again, I'm probably a softie for this stuff. Ricky's not a good player. He is not JT or Spieth. He's certainly not Rahm or DJ or Koepka or Rory, right? So for him to kind of get this type of billing, he's a dude who's won 6 times on tour. He has won the Players Championship. That's about his resume. But he has his own brand. He's beloved, and you can't help but root for him because he's kind of like the little engine that could kind of, that's kind of what he is. And his storyline was really compelling, especially his run at the U.S. Open. And sometimes we forget the second place, or in this case, the 5th place, people in history. But Rory's run-up in the U.S. Open, including the 62 in the opening round, was a fantastic story. And it would have been different, obviously, if he won. But it's good seeing it played out again here in full swing. I really enjoyed it.
And again, it humanizes them, right? Like Claude Harmon, the original, said, I watched the first tee, and he's nervous. He's got nerves.
Oh, yeah, Butch. Yeah, Butch is his dad, right?
I'm sorry, not Claude. Yeah, Butch.
Yeah, he's
talk about the apple falling very far from the tree.
Very far. Butch was great. Butch came out of this thing like, I want to go take lessons from Butch. Of course, he's the best who's ever been, but man,
how
Butch
funny is it? Because you've taken lessons, right?
Oh yeah.
And so watching him in Ricky, it's like, oh, I've had an instructor make me do what he's doing there.
For sure. And then say things like, that's beautiful. That's great. That's sometimes just a little bit of confidence from a guy who knows what he's talking about.
Usually the coaches I work with I don't hear beautiful that often.
Well, like I said, I wrote down, this is the good, the bad, and the ugly of this. This thing is like the good kind of Ricky and the bad, Monahan. And kind of the ugly is, Paul Azinger, because they ran a bunch of Azinger audio during the U.S. Open that was just cringy.
And if we're power ranking the wives, Ricky's wife, at this point in the show, is number 1.
Elite. An elite performance by Allison Stoke Fowler. Elite.
Unbelievable. Bravo.
So, in these shows, they kind of force conversations. Like my favorite cringy Paulina moment is when she's supposedly watching Dustin play the second hole and she's in the fans and Dustin like hits a couple bad shots and she's asking like the fans, where'd that ball go? Dustin's ball. Like, shut up, Paulina. Everybody knows who you are. You know where the ball is. Like, this is all, but it's all for TV. Whereas I feel like even the forced conversations that they kind of forced Ricky and Allison to have when they're sitting outside their porch by the pool, it felt really genuine. Like she's like, you don't open up much. You don't tell me much. And so sometimes I don't know what you're thinking. And Ricky's like, yeah, I need to do better at that. It's like, oh man, they feel like real, like you and your wife sometimes when, you've spent a few too many hours at the bar at Nashville Golf. Like, hey, we need to connect on a better level here.
It's hard to connect with my wife when I'm relegated to the couch after a long day.
But Ricky came out great, especially the way, and I know they didn't have a crew on site at the Rocket Mortgage, but they did a nice job kind of culling footage and showing his victory there. And it was an emotional moment and kind of a little bit of catharsis after what was a really dark, hour and 20 minutes of full swing to start the season.
I thought it was funny too. There was a small scene where Tom Kim is sitting outside of like a tent and he's talking to someone from the tour, like a management member. And he's like, you knew about this? And the guy's like, no, I didn't. He's like, okay, yeah, everyone believes that, but only in a way that Tom Kim can do it that made it just very funny.
I wrote that same thing down. Can we get Tom Kim a reality show? Just follow him around. Because he didn't call that dude out.
100%. The guy's like, look at my eyes. He's like, yeah, okay, we believe you.
And he did it in a way that Tom Kim you can't think of Tom Kim being an a-hole in that situation. Just like every time Matt Fitzpatrick shows up, you're like, he's a bunch of things. He's just not an a-hole. He's just so uncomfortable little dork of the tour. But man, you like every time he shows up, it's not delighted. You're just like, oh, something interesting is going to happen. And you're going to end up feeling kind of sorry for him or entertained by him.
His episode's very good too. And when we get into it,
Fitzpatrick has an episode?
No, well, Tom Kim has an episode as well as Fitzpatrick's brother.
Oh, I can't wait for the Alex Fitzpatrick episode.
Yeah.
I find that very compelling too. I can't wait. God, you get me so fired up. So anyway, watching all of this episode, kind of the ridiculous of the Dustin Johnson lifestyle on the boat, fishing in West Palm Beach, and how clearly apathetic he is to the tour. Like that dude, he doesn't care. They asked him, so, because Matt Fitzpatrick and Rory both kind of came out and said, yes, we should get paid. If they're going to come back to the tour, if this merger is going to happen, we should be compensated for not going to live. And they asked Dustin Johnson, do you think these guys should be compensated by the tour? And Johnson's like, no, I don't. No. We took the risk. He could have easily just said, sure, why not? Like, why stir that hornet's nest? He's like, he knows guys watch this. He's like, no, they don't. That dude is just so apathetic. He cares so little about, I think, anybody else on tour, anybody else, outside of his own little family group. He comes across being almost like the worst of it, of the live guys.
Yeah. And he had a scene in the locker room with Rory where I think you could tell that the cameras were on him because he was a little more chipper than he usually is.
Yeah.
And,
Can we also talk about locker rooms for a second? I love the locker room shots, but what in the world was going on with the locker rooms at Southern Hills? It's like they had these guys in the maintenance barn. Like, what were those lockers? They are deep in the back 40 of lockers, like being in high school again. Like,
this was something.
Lockers were gorgeous.
I listen, is relatively new to the game, not having a lot of access to the professional level. I had always imagined every locker room was a version of ours at Nashville Golf. Mahogany wood, a lot of space. These guys are the best in the world. They're not cramped. And it looked like the JV team, like they pulled in temporary trailers and said, yeah, there you go. I made the same note. I couldn't believe it. It was hilarious to me.
It's like these guys are out there grinding for millions of dollars in front of millions of people.
And they're stepping over each other.
They're like bumping into each other. They're falling over the benches. Poor Ricky Fowler's got his dad on top. Ricky Fowler's sitting there in his 2-unders with his old man 3 feet from him and 4 other tour pros trying to like get their stuff out of their lockers. They're knocking into each other, and he's leading the U.S. Open. It was wild.
It was. I never thought in a million years that was the conditions that they were changing in. It's so different than any other sport, like football. I mean, less the pro game now, but these college locker rooms are just the Taj Mahal. And these guys, like, I don't know, something as mundane as them just like tying their shoes in there, just like, double knotting it. It's like football players have trainers that do everything for it. And these guys are just changing. I don't know. I shouldn't be like giddy about that, but I was giddy about that.
I totally agree. I was giddy about it. I was giddy about Rory McIlroy being so close to Tommy Fleetwood he could smell him. He's like, it smelled good today, Tommy. He's like, smell good, play good. Anyway, it's great. If you are not into Full Swing, I hope you are. I know these are kind of spoiler-filled reviews, but episode 2, Mike, you didn't like as much as 1. If 1 was an AVX, what's episode 2 for you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Because I have episode 2 as being kind of like
an E6, a Bridgestone E6 Speed.
Oh, okay. So good golf ball. But it's not one you're not one you're gonna pull out like at the member guest.
I think that the challenge with this episode was we already knew the outcome of the merger or the proposed merger, and I'm less interested in those dynamics, and I'm watching this show for the moments between Rory and Brooks.
Yeah,
those are the moments I want to see. So to me, it was a little too political. I thought that the Ricky thing was compelling. And DJ just was dead air.
Yeah, it was dead air. It was a waste of time. Even his interview, they have pictures of him laying down in a chair, him getting his picture taken. It's like, just less him. Less him is fine by me. I thought it was like a 2019 Pro V. Good, solid golf ball. Not quite where we are now with the manufacturing, but a good one. Great episode. I think taken together a really good look at what these guys are facing as far as a split tour. Sounds like, not to give anything away, but it sounds like they're going to look at some different storylines going forward, though, right? We're not going to spend the whole year diving into Live.
Yeah, the Live storyline starts to really fade, and the Ryder Cup starts to take center stage.
Yeah, I can't wait for that stuff. I love talking about the Ryder Cup. Well, Mike,
the Ryder Cup is.
I can't wait. I can't wait till we talk about it. It was a wonderful idea for us to get together and talk about it this week. I appreciate, as always, you giving up your time to be on the E9 podcast. Any parting words for the people?
The golf season's around the corner, baby. Don't be stuck with unfitted clubs like Anthony Kim. Go to your local golf pro.
There it is. A plug for the PGA of America from one and only Mike Neal. And everybody, thanks for joining us for the E9 podcast. We'll see you next week for the Players Championship and more Full Swing reviews. Take care, everybody.